Hey friends, and welcome back to our channel, or welcome if you're new here. So I think for a lot of people, especially if you've ever owned an older home and you aren't handy, or you are handy but you don't really have time or really want to spend your downtime fixing things, then a new construction home can be very appealing.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to think that, you can get the most modern finishes, no big issues for at least a few years. You're the first person to actually live in the house. But there's definitely a lot of things that you need to consider before buying a new construction home here in Utah.
If this is your first time to this channel and you want to know everything about living, eating, sleeping, working, and playing here in Northern Utah, then subscribe below and tap the bell for notifications so you can be the first to know about the market here in Northern Utah.
Yeah, we're Sloan and Kim Peterson here with the Peterson Group, and we've been in the real estate business for over 10 years, and every day we help people just like you looking to buy, sell, invest, or relocate here in Northern Utah, and we actually do love helping all of you out with it. Whether you're moving in 9 days or 90 days, go ahead and give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email. All that information is in that description box below, so we can help you make that smooth transition here to Northern Utah. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay, so let's dive right into it because there is really a lot to discuss when it comes to new construction, and it can feel a little overwhelming. But let's just take it step by step and talk about what you need to know before looking into new construction. So the first thing and the most important thing to understand is representation. Now, since the advent of the buyer agent, which I think was like in the 90s, right? Yeah. Most buyers want their own representation, which is definitely a good idea. Even as the seller agent on a listing, I prefer to work with a buyer that has their own representation versus being unrepresented. One thing we always tell our clients if they are interested in new construction is to never talk to a builder agent or go look at model homes without us. Now, the reason for that is in Utah, if you show up to your first appointment or showing on your own, the builder will no longer compensate a buyer agent for you. So, for you to have your own representation, you would have to pay for it on your own.
Yeah, exactly. And the other reason is going to be because those builder agents are actually sales agents. They're meant to sell a product and not just have a relationship to get what you want. So obviously a lot of their money is going to come from, upselling finishes and upgrading things in the home, like extra flooring or anything they can. They want to start at a base price and this really upgrade it as much as possible. Something to also know is that a majority, if not all, of the builders are really going to make sure that you have your upgrades paid in cash, because if you over upgrade and you choose to back out, then the seller is really not going to be able to recoup that cost. So sometimes you might have more of an upfront construction deposit or down payment that's going to be required there. So having your own representation is important because you really need someone in your corner that's looking out for your best interest and trying to, decide whether you should do those upgrades with the builder or maybe just with the contractor later on. Sometimes the builder stuff's actually more important to do it when you're building it, and other times you would actually get it far cheaper doing it, after you've closed on the house. And that's not to say that there aren't great builder agents out there. There are, and we actually work with quite a few of them. But obviously just knowing that their job is to, look out for the builder's interest in their bottom lines and not for yours. So the buyer agent is there to look at your bottom line and making sure that the construction process moves quickly and that they're not taking advantage of you.
And just, to kind of touch on that, I know that for most people, they're like, well, I know what I need. I don't need representation, but I cannot tell you, myself included, how carried away you can get by emotions when you're seeing all the coolest upgrades and all the newest things. But again, that can add on like $100,000 more to your contract that you are just getting tied up in the emotion and the excitement. So again, just having your own representation to kind of take a step back and be like, these things are all cool, but let's talk about what's really necessary.
Totally, and some buyers think that by not using representation, they might get better deals. Usually rarely the case. So the builder's already kind of adjusted, their bottom line to account for paying for at least a portion of that buyer agent fee. So, usually going in by yourself is not really going to help you save some money and use those for other places. So just something to keep in mind as well.
So the next thing is to really do your research. With your agent, look at a few different builders, a few different models from each builder, different areas, and all of that stuff, because your dollar is actually different in every city with every build. And find what fits your needs the best. So there's 3 different types of builds. There's what we call a spec build, there's a semi-custom build, and then a full custom build. So quite frankly, I would say 90% of builders since 2020 are the spec build. And that's basically the builder just builds their homes, they choose color and materials, and you just kind of get to pick which one you like and buy it. Now the pro to that is they're usually quick move-ins, and the builder doesn't usually release them until 45 to 60 days from completion. You know exactly what you're paying for and what you're getting and when you're going to be able to move in. Obviously, the downside is you take what you get, and you might not love everything about the house.
With that semi-custom one, you really don't get to choose, the floor plan or make structural changes, but you do get to pick some of the things like colors, materials like countertops and flooring, and you may be able to add, another garage or finish the basement out with the builder. Things like that. The pro is that you get to be more involved in the process and you have more choices to pick, some things like the style, which would more fit what you're looking for and want. The cons are that you usually have to wait, anywhere from 6 to 8 months, and a lot can happen in that time. And with your upgrades, you get to add, what you want. The price can increase substantially. That usually goes non-refundable, 2 to 3 weeks after you go under contract once the build starts. And of course, you have the fully custom option. You design the whole floor plan, choose every material, the whole works. Obviously, that's going to cost a lot more money than a spec home, and it can take up to years depending on the complexity of your design, and you're at the beck and call of the contractors and all the subs. Do they have the availability, and when can they get back to the subdivision?
I for one would love to custom build, but yes, that's obviously quite pricey. So a few expenses you need to consider when purchasing a new construction are things like landscaping, which can be super pricey, anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 to $60,000, depending on what kind of design you want. I mean, I've seen some beautiful lawns, so if you do enjoy landscaping or like being outdoors, then putting in your own can definitely be a pro. Just expect for that to be an added expense because typically builders don't provide landscaping, or minimally, they will just do the front yard. Another expense to consider is window coverings. Very few new builds come with any sort of window coverings, and also appliances. It's about 50-50 whether a new build will come with a refrigerator or not, and they never come with washers or dryers. So just some additional expenses to consider when looking at your overall budget.
Yeah, definitely some questions to consider asking when you're looking at new builds is how long is your process? I've seen people complete them as quick as 2 to 3 months, and other builders where they're not even starting to dig, for 6 or 7 months, and it takes actually 12 to 18 months. Do they accept any contingencies? Like, are they going to allow you to sell your home first, or do they want that sold before you can even go under contract? What's the down payment or construction deposit that they're going to ask? I've seen that be as low as $2,000 and as much as $30,000, right? So it's just going to depend on, can you access that kind of money before maybe you sell your house and can be able to do that? Are they providing any landscaping for you, right? Kim mentioned that sometimes they do the front yard, sometimes they do nothing, sometimes they give you a little bit of an allowance. So just seeing what they're able or willing to do there. Maybe you don't want the landscaping that they're going to put in. Maybe, they're going to do very basic sod and you want something a little more extravagant for your front yard. Is there an HOA fee? And if so, what does it cover? Do they have a swimming pool maybe that the Hill community is sharing? Do they have a park or a clubhouse? What are you getting for the HOA? Or is the HOA just there simply to protect you from your neighbor painting their house, Pepto-Bismol pink? Can you customize anything, like add anything in the structures or add, like we talked about, garages, anything like that? And most importantly, what's really included in your base price? A lot of builders these days, they do include, standard things like granite in the base price and sometimes even quartz, but comparing, what each builder has in that base price is gonna be important. Some builders add more upgrades into their base price than others do, which can save you even more money, especially if you have to pay for all those upgrades in cash on top of the list price. Of course, your agent should be asking the builder agent all these questions for you and on behalf of you, but just make sure that you're asking all these questions that are going to be important to you before you're putting any down payment money that might become non-refundable, or of course signing any paperwork.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought up paperwork because most builders use a different contract, and that's super important to know. Most of the contracts are builder specific and have different language than a traditional real estate contract. So make sure you understand everything in that contract and that your agent is actually reading through all of it. It talks about when the builder has the right to increase the purchase price, which can happen 4 or 5 months into the build. So make sure you understand your obligations before handing over any big down payment. Other things to look for are lot premiums. So sometimes for a corner lot or a better location, maybe a backyard that backs into a park, you can pay anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 more just for the lot. Typically, you reserve your lot with a smaller fee, around $2,000 to $5,000, and then once you meet with the builder and decide what plan you want to move forward with, then you'll sign the contract and pay that bigger construction deposit. That is only for semi-customizable, of course. The spec homes are usually just a more traditional earnest money type, since you aren't picking anything and it's a lot shorter of a time frame. Another thing to look for, and this doesn't happen very often, but in a market like 2020, like we had, material costs. If material costs increase by X amount, they can pass that on to you as the buyer, and sometimes that happens well into the build. So just making sure you have an agent that's very thorough in reading those contracts and explaining all of your obligations.
Yeah, so another thing I recently seen on a contract that, these weren't clients of mine, but they were some friends of mine, is they actually went to go sell their house 3 years later. And since they had actually had what they call an equity cap, so if they make more than a certain amount of equity in a 5-year period, they have to share that equity with the builder. Isn't that insane? So they actually were gonna have to give the builder back $30,000 of their equity once they sold their house, because they were selling within a 5-year period. So there's lots of weird nuances like that you'll see in contracts, and you just wanna make sure that you have an agent or someone helping you look into that kind of stuff, just to make sure you understand exactly what you're signing.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times, with new builds, a lot of clients are under the misconception that they can just go look at the models, talk to the agent, and then, like we talked about, come back and get their own representation. Again, making sure that before you even start the process, because there are all of those little nuances, that you're speaking to your own representation first. And so let's go into inspections. Inspections
are really important. A lot of people, I feel like, forego inspections on new construction. And if you're not represented by a third-party agent, the builder agent is going to really advise you that you don't need it. Don't even worry about it.
Everything's brand new, right? Why would we need it?
You have a builder warranty and you have all this manufacturer warranties and things. But we've actually seen some pretty crazy inspection reports come out of new construction, right? Like one house that we were involved in, it was being built by a decently respected builder in our area, and they had put the flashing on backwards, right? So we get there, I don't know anything about, obviously, roofing, that's not my trade, but we get there and my client actually had some experience in roofing when he was younger, and he looked up at it and he goes, you know what? That actually has bad flashing. He hadn't gotten an inspection yet. So after that, he decided, I'm gonna go ahead and get an inspection. The inspection came and confirmed this flashing was placed backwards, which would actually be pouring all the water into my client's windows. Another one we went to actually tested positive for meth. Meth, guys. So you're like, who the hell was smoking meth in the new construction? Well, the workers were smoking meth in there because they had high deadlines and they were just overworked. Not saying that I would use meth if I'm overworked, but they used meth in the place. The cool thing about it is, since it's from the builder, easily able to get that remediated and have the builder pay for those kind of things, right? So we've seen all sorts of issues with new construction. We've seen framing that was done incorrectly, where the window wasn't even centered. There's all sorts of weird stuff. So what I would recommend you do is get an inspection, and really you should be doing an inspection a few different times. Do one at framing, that way you can make sure that everything's framed correctly and that it's where it's supposed to be. And then you can do one after drywall, and then maybe another one when it's finished. And fourth but not least, you can actually have your inspector come back at your 10 to 11 month mark and make sure that you get everything that's going to be on that 1-year builder warranty replaced and is submitted from that inspection as well.
Yes, definitely. All good tips. Okay, so let's talk about financing when it comes to new builds. Now, there's a ton of different financing options. They will also vary based on whether you're buying just the lot and having a semi-custom build, or buying just a lot and having a custom build on it, buying a spec home. It all looks different. And so I will say most of the homes in Utah go the traditional financing route, meaning just like a resale property, you get pre-qualified for X amount, and then you take that pre-qualification into a new build and purchase your home with a regular loan. Now, however, there are certain loans called construction loans. You will see these a lot with custom builds, but they also sometimes happen with smaller builders that maybe can't hold the loan themselves or wait for traditional financing. And so in that case, what ends up happening is you go to the bank and you do what's called a construction loan. And the builder, it's for X amount. Say you pre-approve for $600,000. The builder then is authorized to come do draws during each stage of the build to essentially pay for the build. So they'll do a draw for the lumber, they'll do a draw for the materials. And so that is called a construction loan, in which essentially you hold the loan, but the builder is utilizing your money in which to actually get that home built. Again, that's not as standard in Utah, and you really want to make sure that if you're doing that kind of loan, you are using a respected lender who understands those types of loans, knows what they should be looking for. And again, if you have a great agent representing you, they can facilitate all of that on your behalf.
Yeah, so I also just want to touch bases on, using the preferred lender for the builder, or just using your own preferred lender, or the one that your agent has recommended for you. So sometimes the builder agents will say, you know what, if you use our preferred lender, we're actually going to give you, maybe a free granite upgrade, or $5,000 to your closing costs, or XYZ types of things, right? It's going to come into place. But you guys need to be careful there, because sometimes it's a real incentive and it's actually in your best interest to do so. Other times, they're actually just putting that incentive onto the back end of the loan, or they're increasing some upgrades somewhere else to where you're not really getting any sort of benefit. And sometimes the builder lender really isn't the best lender for you. Now, I'm not saying that they're not all the time, but sometimes they are working with so many people at the same time that you just kind of get lost in the shuffle, which is not going to give you that good experience, and you're not really even saving any money at the end of the day. So just make sure, sometimes you are, sometimes you're not, but you can also work with your preferred lender, or one that your agent has recommended if you don't know one. And sometimes they're able to match the builder incentives, and you can still use more of the lender that you want to use. That's going to give you that high level of a service level, right? But still be getting some of the incentive you might have gotten from the builder. So just run it by, your agent, or just look at both things, like on the back end of the paperwork, like, are they actually adding in some sort of extra fee that I'm actually buying my incentive, and in actuality, it's not even an incentive to begin with.
Yeah, and sometimes the way that they'll do it, which we've seen a lot of, is sure, we'll pay your closing costs, but then they make you make up the difference in the purchase price. So essentially, they're telling you they're willing to allow you to finance your closing costs, which is not really an incentive.
Yeah,
you're essentially paying for your
super weird. I
closing
actually had a conversation with a really good builder agent in my area, and she kept telling me that. She's like, okay, yeah, we'll pay the $15,000 in closing costs, but your purchase price is $15,000 more. And I'm like, then aren't we just paying for the closing costs? Like, that didn't really make sense. And I kept telling her that, like, so we're paying for the incentive, so it's not an incentive. And she was like, yeah, basically you're right, but that's kind of how it is. So definitely something to consider, obviously, if you're using your own lender versus, a builder lender. Well, guys, that does it for us on this video. We've helped a ton of families purchase new constructions here in Northern Utah, and they can be a great option for a lot of people. Hopefully, we've given you guys some insight on the new build process, and if you have any more questions about new builds, want to look at any when you're in town, feel free to text us, email us, or shoot us a call. We're happy to hop on a Zoom call as well. Just reach out. All of our information is obviously in that description box below, or in that comment section, so you can definitely reach out anytime you have any questions.
We hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Picking where you'll call home is an important and personal decision, and we would love to help you make that smooth transition to the Northern Utah area. If you're looking to purchase in the Northern Utah area, we would love to help you out. Give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email. And until next time, we are keeping it real estate.